They used to call me their miracle child, the one who would carry the Laurent name higher than ever, not through love, but through strategy. Every dinner was a performance, every smile rehearsed. The mansion gleamed with chandeliers and polished silence, and I learned early that affection here was conditional. They spoke in investments, not emotions, every conversation measured by how it could look to others. Yet, beneath the perfect posture and pearls, something in me stirred. A quiet, dangerous hunger to be seen, not displayed. It began the night I met someone who didn't care about last names, only laughter. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would fracture everything they'd built for me, and everything they believed about love. My parents believed life was a transaction, affection bought with obedience, worth proven by comparison. That night, their guests praised the Laurent discipline, and I smiled on cue. But outside, in the garden beyond the glowing windows, laughter floated from the staff's quarters. Real, unpolished laughter that didn't ask permission to exist. That sound stayed with me. I wanted to know what it felt like to laugh without consequence, to speak without strategy. That's when I met him, holding a tray, sleeves rolled up, smile effortless. I didn't yet know his name, but I recognized something I'd never owned: freedom. It started with small conversations about weather, books, and music. He never asked who my father was. For once, I wasn't someone's daughter, someone's investment. I was simply a woman being listened to. We met behind the greenhouse after every event, hidden among orchids that bloomed without permission. For the first time, I began to understand how silence could feel safe, how a heartbeat could feel like home. But every secret grows teeth when it's starved of daylight, and the mansion had eyes in every corner. Whispers travel faster than truth in houses built on reputation. One morning, my mother's voice echoed from the corridor, low, furious, and trembling. She'd heard something. I stood behind the door, heart pounding, listening to them plan my future as if I were a business deal gone wrong. They spoke of family names, lineage, and the embarrassment of man without prospects. That was the day I realized I'd rather lose a daughter than lose control. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I felt awake. That evening, I walked into the dining hall and told them the truth, that I loved him. Their faces didn't change at first, only hardened like marble accepting its final shape. My father's voice dropped to a tone I'd never heard. Not anger, but disbelief, as if love itself were beneath us. My mother cried, not for me, but for what the neighbors would say. When I stood to leave, I didn't take any of their money, just my dignity. I remember thinking, maybe love isn't freedom. Maybe it's the courage to lose everything for something real. I thought the worst part would be the yelling, but silence hurts more. After that night, my parents didn't scream. They erased me. My room was emptied within hours, my name removed from every account. To them, I didn't exist anymore. I packed a suitcase under the eyes of the staff who once bowed when I entered. None of them met my gaze. The air in that house had turned sterile. No warmth, no history, just status and space. As I walked down the marble steps with nothing but a worn suitcase and trembling hands, I realized I wasn't being punished. I was being freed. But freedom, I would learn, can be a brutal teacher. The first night away felt like standing at the edge of the world. I found a tiny apartment above a bakery that smelled of sugar and burnt coffee. The ceiling leaked, the walls echoed, but for the first time, every imperfection felt alive. Daniel showed up with secondhand furniture and 2 cups of tea. No champagne, no crystal, just steam curling into the air like hope. I wanted to cry, not from loss, but from the strange comfort of being seen without performance. That night, I fell asleep to the hum of traffic and the quiet rhythm of someone who chose me, not what I came from. My parents didn't call. Not for weeks, not for months. The silence became a second skin. I learned to stretch a paycheck, to patch clothes, to count blessings instead of zeros. Some nights I caught myself glancing at the phone, wondering if pride ever softened with time. It never did. But life has a strange way of filling the spaces pride leaves empty. Laughter, shared meals, the scent of coffee at sunrise. I began to feel something I never had before. Ownership of my own life. It wasn't until a gala invitation arrived, embossed with gold letters in my parents' names, that I realized how completely I'd been replaced. The envelope wasn't meant for me. It was meant to remind me of who I'd stopped being. My parents had hosted a charity event in honor of family legacy. I stared at the invitation until the ink blurred through my tears. I didn't belong there anymore, and maybe I never truly had. That night, I burned the envelope in the sink, watching their world turn to ash in my hands. They thought cutting me off would break me, but it only cut the strings they'd tied around my heart. There were nights when doubt clawed at me, whispering that love couldn't survive without money. But Daniel never let the light go out. We built something small but honest. I worked, he dreamed. And together we built the kind of life you can't buy, the kind you earn, one scar at a time. Looking back, I see it now. Losing them was the first real gift they ever gave me. We learned to live with less noise, less pride, less pretending. The mornings smelled of instant coffee and the sound of Daniel leaving early for work. I took a job at a small design studio where I signed my name on paper without the weight of my father's last name beside it. At night, we shared leftovers and stories, laughing at how survival could feel like an accomplishment. There was peace in the struggle, a rhythm to the routine. For the first time, every breath felt like it belonged to me. Unmeasured, unjudged, unborrowed. Some days, exhaustion hit harder than hunger. We counted coins at grocery aisles, learned which corners of the city offered the cheapest produce, and found beauty in imperfection. A chipped cup, a secondhand chair, a sunrise through cracked blinds. The world outside didn't see us, but we didn't need it to. I stopped checking social media, stopped wondering if my parents thought of me. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford, but gratitude, that came free. And somehow, it was enough. Daniel dreamed of starting his own workshop, a small furniture studio where craftsmanship mattered more than credentials. I remember the first table he built. It wobbled, but he was proud, like it was a masterpiece. I spent nights designing a logo for his name, and we laughed at how serious we sounded calling it a business. It wasn't about profit. It was about belonging somewhere that didn't reject us. Every nail, every sketch, every tired smile was a rebellion against everything my parents had taught me. Our love deepened between long hours and late dinners. Sometimes we argued about bills, exhaustion, and fear. But even in anger, there was honesty. No masks, no pretense. We didn't always have answers, but we had each other's backs. I'd wake at night and see him asleep beside me, his hands rough from work, his chest rising steadily, and I'd realize something powerful. We were building more than a life. We were building peace. It took 3 years for the workshop to stand on its own. Orders came slowly at first, then faster, one recommendation leading to another. I watched Daniel's hands shape not just wood, but a future. My parents' world had taught me perfection. His world taught me purpose. And when I hung our first business sign above the door, carved by his hand, I realized something that changed everything. Success wasn't about reaching higher. It was about standing steady on your own ground. 5 years passed, and life began to hum with a quiet rhythm of purpose. The workshop grew, the apartment got brighter, and laughter became our daily language. We didn't chase luxury. We built stability. Clients came because of Daniel's integrity and stayed because of the warmth in his work. I learned how to manage accounts, how to dream again, how to exist without apology. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd wonder if my parents ever drove by the street where our little studio stood. Maybe they did. Maybe they couldn't bear to see what love had built without them. Success came gently. A magazine feature, a word-of-mouth surge, a few local awards. But what meant most wasn't recognition. It was the way Daniel looked at me after long days, like we'd finally arrived somewhere worth calling home. We bought a small house, nothing fancy, but full of light. I painted the walls myself. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized her. Not the obedient heiress they raised, but the woman I became through every scraped knee and sleepless night. For the first time, I didn't miss them. I pitied them. Our business began hiring others, young craftsmen who reminded Daniel of himself, eager and patient. I handled designs and clients. He handled the soul of the work. Sometimes I caught headlines about my parents, charity events, award ceremonies, photographs of them shaking hands with people who spoke in currency instead of compassion. Their smiles looked rehearsed, their eyes hollow. We were invisible to them, yet somehow I didn't feel small anymore. I felt free. Then one morning, I got an email from a luxury interior firm. They wanted our work featured in a high-profile hotel renovation. It was the kind of offer my parents used to chase, the kind of recognition they'd respect. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. We accepted, of course, not out of pride, but gratitude. Yet I couldn't shake the irony. The world that once rejected us now wanted our touch to make it beautiful. Maybe that's how life balances things. It doesn't punish, it reveals. The hotel project changed everything. Suddenly, we weren't a small business anymore. We were a brand. But with success came echoes of the past. A reporter, unaware of my history, asked if I was related to the Lawrence. I hesitated before saying, "Not anymore." That night, Daniel asked if I'd ever want to see them again. I told him I'd already said goodbye. What I didn't say, what I couldn't, was that I still dreamed of my mother's voice calling my name. And always, just before I answered, I woke up. News travels differently when it's bad. Faster, meaner, louder. I first heard whispers at a client dinner. The Lawrence lost their investors. I pretended not to care, but my chest tightened all the same. A week later, the headlines confirmed it. Their company had collapsed under debt. Properties sold. Accounts frozen. Influence gone. For years, they'd built their empire on appearance, and now appearance was all that remained. Hollow, desperate, unsustainable. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I felt something worse. Pity. Days later, I drove past the old estate. The gates were gone, the grass overgrown, the windows boarded. The house that once defined us now stood like a monument to arrogance. I remembered the echo of my mother's heels, the scent of polished floors, my father's commands. Now, only wind and dust remained. I parked for a long time, engine running, memories flickering like ghosts in the headlights. Then I turned away, because some graves don't need flowers. The world they'd worshipped turned its back overnight. Former friends vanished. Creditors called publicly. My parents had always believed money made them untouchable. But debt makes everyone equal. I saw their names trending online, mocked and dissected by strangers who once envied them. Daniel asked if I wanted to reach out. I said no. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But late that night, I caught myself scrolling through old photos again. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The kind that doesn't ache anymore. Then came the letter. Not typed, not formal, handwritten. My mother's script, shaky but familiar. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for help. "They're taking everything," she wrote. "Please, Emma." 2 words I'd waited my whole life to hear, but not like this. I sat at the table, the paper trembling in my hands. The little girl inside me wanted to run back. The woman I'd become knew better. You can't save people who still believe love is a transaction. I didn't answer right away. For days, the letter stayed folded in a drawer beside my bed, like a wound I wasn't ready to reopen. But fate doesn't wait for comfort. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there they were, my parents. Smaller than I remembered. My father's pride had melted into exhaustion. My mother's elegance had cracked into fear. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then my mother whispered, "Emma, please." And I realized this wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. They looked nothing like the parents I remembered. The sharpness in their posture was gone, their eyes dulled with sleepless regret. I invited them inside, not because I owed them comfort, but because humanity demands decency, even when love has expired. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend air. My father scanned the modest furniture. My mother clasped her hands like a child in church. For once, I didn't shrink beneath their gaze. I simply asked, "What do you need?" And the truth came out. They needed me. The daughter they had once taught to need no one. They spoke of debts, of lawsuits, of shame. My father's voice, once commanding, now trembled with exhaustion. He blamed bad partners, bad timing, never himself. My mother cried softly, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief that no longer matched her old pearls. I listened, every word reopening scars I thought had healed. When they finally asked for money, I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief. For years, love was a transaction to them. Now, so was survival. And here I was, the one person who could rewrite that cruel equation. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I asked them if they remembered the day they cut me off. The way my mother turned her face, the way my father told me love was earned. My mother whispered, "We thought we were protecting you." My father said nothing. The silence that followed was louder than their cruelty ever was. For the first time, they looked small, not because they'd fallen, but because I'd grown. I told them I would help, but not as their daughter, as a stranger doing what they never could, choosing compassion over pride. We arranged the paperwork together, quiet, businesslike, ironic. I transferred what they needed, enough to clear their debts, and give them a place to start again. My father thanked me without meeting my eyes. My mother tried to apologize, but the words fell apart halfway through. When they left, she turned back once and whispered, "You're stronger than we ever were." For the first time, I believed her, because strength isn't inherited, it's earned by surviving the people who taught you weakness. After they left, the house felt heavier, like grief disguised as relief. I sat by the window for a long time, watching the rain blur the streetlights. Daniel came beside me, slipped his hand into mine, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. Some endings don't explode. They dissolve quietly, like smoke in cold air. I realized forgiveness isn't about absolution. It's about closure. I had finally stopped waiting for their love, and somehow in that stillness I found peace. Weeks passed, and silence returned. Not the cold silence of rejection, but the stillness that follows acceptance. I never told anyone I'd help them. The world didn't need to know. Sometimes I imagined them rebuilding, smaller, humbler, maybe even kinder. I didn't check. I'd learned that closure doesn't come from knowing how others end. It comes from knowing how you continue. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the girl who'd lost her family. I felt like a woman who had built one. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a photograph. My parents standing outside a modest countryside home. My father looked older, smaller, but smiling. My mother held his hand. On the back, in shaky script, were 3 words. "We're trying, Emma." I didn't cry. I simply placed it on the mantel beside our wedding photo. Maybe that's all forgiveness really is. Giving someone the chance to change, even if you never see how. Our studio continued to grow. Slowly, but steadily. People came not for luxury, but for honesty. For the kind of craftsmanship that carries a story in every grain of wood. Sometimes when I saw young couples walk into our shop, full of dreams and fear, I saw fragments of who we used to be, and I'd tell them gently, the hardest part of love isn't finding it. It's protecting it from pride. They never understood at first. But one day, they will. Sometimes I drive past the edge of the city and watch the skyline fade behind me. The air feels different there. Lighter. Like the world has stopped expecting something from me. I think of the mansion of those cold halls that once dictated my worth, and I realize the past doesn't disappear. It just stops controlling you when you stop bowing to it. I'm not my parents' daughter anymore. I'm the woman their mistakes helped me become. Life has a way of circling back, not to punish but to teach. My parents taught me the cost of pride. Daniel taught me the value of love. And I taught myself the meaning of peace. I paid their debts, but in doing so I settled my own. The debt of needing their approval. In the end, I didn't rescue them for who they were. I did it to prove who I'd become. Some stories end with forgiveness. Mine ends with freedom. How?